plans, and I'll touch on that a little bit more later. So in 1982, they received it to build the actual station. The municipality received a grant. The grant funding had to come to the municipality because they couldn't just give it to a group of people who wanted the money. So that's why it became a municipal asset. We conducted the fire protection survey. The assembly authorized the procurement of the land and building of the building. That was completed in October of 1985. And from 85 to the present day, it's been maintained by funding from the Anchorage Fire Service area taxpayers. In October, as I mentioned earlier, there was a bond to expand the station, but it failed. There have been a couple of other minor funding that we received from the state, mostly to purchase the adjacent about 2 acres. I think it's about 2 acres. With the whole plan, eventually we would expand the station and turn it into a fully staffed fire station to serve that area. And those plans never came to fruition. We've never had the ability to do that. We did get the money and buy the land. We just weren't able to come up with the rest of the money for a fully staffed station. As I mentioned, why are we at this point where we want to dispose of it and get it out of or do something else with it so that we're no longer responsible for it? Since 2009, we have used it as a warm storage facility. It is not included in any of the emergency response planning for that area. It was used for brush trucks and a reserve engine. Well, the reserve engine has been surplus. The brush trucks we have other space for, so we no longer need the structure. And the closure of the station doesn't change any of the emergency response for the area. It's not a water source. It probably wouldn't be adequate for any type of emergency service provided in the area, and we don't really need it. The service for that area is covered by a joint between Eagle River Fire Station 11, which is also an Anchorage Fire Department facility service, and the crews from Station 6. That's who respond to that area. And funds from the sale would be used to support AFD operations needs. There's information on the parcel itself, and I'll let Robin take over from here.
So our process, when a department calls us and says, we have a property, sometimes facility, sometimes raw land, that says we no longer need, then we go through a process that includes what's called an agency review. And that agency review goes out to all the assembly members, every department, community councils. Everyone is notified that we are intending to surplus this piece of property. So on our agency review on this parcel, we received 2 responses in writing that said they didn't need the property, weren't interested in it, but a phone call from Eagle River Street Maintenance that they were interested in it. So these are 2 residential lots. They're zone CER6, which is large lot subdivisions, especially in that area. They have to be at acre plus. Both of these, when you combine them, are close to actually 4 acres. The building itself is 1,920 square feet, as you can see it here, with 3 bays. It is really, that's all it is. There's not really anything else there. The combined assessed value, if it were assessed in the private sector, would be about a little over $340,000. We did, it's very expensive to go get appraisals on these, so we get a professional broker's value of opinion of value, and the broker's opinion of value on this came in at about $356,000. However, we know, just given the market in Eagle River for single-family lots, this would take 2 single-family homes, one with a very nice workshop garage on it. So we were proposing the minimum bid be $399,000. So again, when street maintenance, Eagle River Street Maintenance called, we explained to them that this was in a residential area. The CC&Rs did not allow any other use besides residential, and in fact, when the fire station was built in the first place, there had to be a majority vote of the neighbors within that were included in those CC&Rs to waive that provision. Street Maintenance had actually went out and did the same thing. He tells me he has those waivers. So they would be in a position to be able to transfer management authority on those. And we've been asked, why not just transfer? So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Lance Wilbur, and he can talk a little bit about how departments book their assets and how they transfer those.
Just a quick question, which I may, Robert. When an organization says this asset's surplus to our needs, and you said the notification go out, is the street maintenance on that distribution list? And then you have a process by which they can respond.
Correct.
Who can, and so on. So you certainly implied, and I agree with you, that street maintenance kind of didn't do the formal response the way they should have, but you're kind of honoring their phone call.
Through the chair, Mr. Dyson, absolutely we are. As far as I'm concerned, he did respond. I mean, they still responded,
Yeah.
not in writing, but he responded.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Go ahead.
My name is Lance Wilbur. I'm the Director of Office of Management and Budget. And I think the one point that I just want to make in this presentation is that when a department, as many of you know, the municipality has multiple service areas. And in each one of those service areas, if the department has an asset in that service area and they want to dispose of it, particularly in this particular case, if they want to sell it, the receipts from the sale of that property, depending on where it would be our goal is to keep those receipts of that sale of that property in the same service area for the same department that had them. So if street maintenance, or let's say in a similar, maybe a total random example, if Robin Hills Limited Road Service area had a piece of property where they were storing a piece of equipment, and they weren't using it anymore, and they had the ability to sell it and they wanted to use it for residential, rather than just taking that piece of property and giving it to another municipal agency, Robin Hills and that service area would be able to just dispose of that property, use that property for some other purpose. It's a similar situation here. If it is a municipal service out, not like Robin Hills Road Service area, but if it was a parks facility, or in this case a fire department or a police department facility, those service areas, if they're going to dispose of that, we would look to make sure that those return of those assets would go back to that department for their budget. And so if they're successful in selling this piece of property, we'd recommend that those receipts go back to the fire department. Obviously, they have a lot of needs currently, and they will have in the future, so they certainly benefit from the proceeds. So again, sale of the proceeds in the service area should stay in the service area.
Thank you. Mr. Whittleton, then Mr. Dyson.
And so that's, I guess, interesting to me, because it seems like before you dispose of something, you send a note out to all the agencies and say, hey, you guys want first dibs.
Yes.
So they would pay you for it?
Yes, and that is
Okay,
the
it's not
standard.
just
Many times, through the chair, Mr. Whittleton, that is the standard policy, that they would pay a negotiated, either it's assessed value, fair market value, or whatever, but they reimburse that department for that asset. That is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whittleton. Mr. Dyson.
Yeah, it's intriguing. You said a couple of things that could be in conflict. You wanted to stay for the benefit of the region where it exists, and you'd like it to be for the benefit. So the money for selling this would go into training for firefighters all over the municipality, right?
Or whatever the chief decides, whatever they decide to do.
Yeah, so then you couldn't really say that the money recovered from the sale all accumulates just to that exact area where it is.
Correct. Whatever the entire service area, the fire service area, includes the whole area.
And I would bet you if we went back and the money that the legislature committed to this, that those guys had very much in that money be for the people there, that area. And that's why going to the road service area, that services that accomplishes that. This is a little bit of a textbook illustration of what we can do if we overemphasize the silo thing, where each department just looked after itself, and not concerned about what's going on with other departments. And all of us are human enough to understand that one. Ultimately, I think that the municipality of Anchorage and its leadership which is a pretty accomplished bunch, needs to step back from that and say, no, each one of these departments is gonna have a bit of tunnel vision. We're looking at the greater good of the whole thing, you know, and so on. So policy that just says that money can only go to the department that surplused it doesn't have the larger view that bright, thoughtful people like you and Bill and others need to do that. So was there any, in the language where the money was appropriated, is there any language in there that conditions what that legislative grant could be used for?
It was used to build a fire station for the South Florida Volunteer Fire Department, and the only stipulation that it got included in there was that they had to form a fire service area so that they could continue the maintenance and operation of the facility.
Yeah, so they never said you can't sell it or make it for another use or anything else. There was no condition.
Not that we're aware of.
Yeah, all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dyson. Miss Altel.
Thank you. Ms. Ward, this is two parcels, two residential parcels. Is there a reason we wouldn't divide them for sale?
We certainly can.
Okay, and does, the road maintenance, do they want both parcels? Just the one with the garage or fire station on it?
They led me to believe that through the chair, they led me to believe they wanted both of them. The other is just a raw property that is next door to it. We certainly can split those up if they would market better, or if again, departments get first choice of assets that are surplus, and if he really only needs one, we could certainly sell that other one too. That would.
Do we know if it's a benefit if we're going to have this go through sealed competitive bid to divide them? Do we have like an idea of what the difference of amounts would be?
Through the chair, Ms. Salazar, the one with the, I think I have it actually, what the assessed values are on those. The parcel that has the building on it is assessed at $253,700. Let's see what the other one is. And the other is assessed at $87,800. Now that's assessed value. We believe that fair market value would be higher than that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Altel. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so, looking at your the money expended over the years, you've got about $500,000 from the fire department in this building, and we're going to get around $400,000 back. So we're basically taking somewhat of a loss of it, even though the money was spent over a long period of time. And so, yeah, I was thinking possibly maybe real estate has gone up in value enough out there that we might be able to get more than that. But you're the expert. I don't know. I'm just trying to look out for the taxpayers' dollars.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson.
May I respond?
Sure.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Peterson, the $500,000 that you're talking about, that was operating money, maintain and staff and so on and so forth. The capital money came from the legislature. So, I'd have to think about it, but go back and recapturing operating money for salaries and heating and so on and so forth for a function that was going on at that time. I'm not sure that that's valid. I think it's a good question to ask.
Yeah, you make a good point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Weddleton.
So, is the barrier for the road service area taken in the zoning issue? Or
No.
they just
No.
can't pay for
Through the
it?
chair, no, it is just the funds.
Okay, so
It's
they're
the
not
funds
willing
rate.
or able to pay for it? The
That's
road-
my
road service
understanding,
area.
is that they.
Is someone know?
So I'll just, Alex Slipka, CFO, the road service area actually does have net $1 million that they could, and that the financial department would be more than willing to work with the road service on a long-term finance deal, so if they didn't want to pay for it all right now, they could pay for it over time. If they have the money, they run about a $7 million annual budget, they do have the money to pay for it if they chose.
Okay, so they could buy it. Can they legally be there and use it for their operation as it's owned now?
Through the chair, Mr. Weddleton, it's my understanding that, yes, they can't really buy it. It's called management authority transfers. All land is held in the title of the municipality of Anchorage, but it's a management authority transfer. I believe that Mr. Littlefield has waivers from a majority of the homeowners, which is what's required in the CC and Rs for another use other than residential. So it's my understanding that they could operate them.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. So Ms. Kennedy and then Mr. Dyson.
Thank you. I spent a couple of years on the road board, chaired it most recently before I came on the assembly. And the $1 million is a fund balance. And the $1 million is basically that safety net that you keep for emergencies. And in terms of what the road board is dealing with right now, we are making hundreds of thousands of dollars of repairs up Highland Road after the earthquake. So a lot of that $1 million is really going to end up going toward what the $2 million that we typically have for capital improvements any given year is basically only half of what we need to do the repairs caused by the earthquake. So that $1 million is probably going to end up going towards some of that until we figure out what FEMA's going to do. So we're like everybody else, kind of in that suspended animation, if you will, on whether or not we're going to get the money to actually do the amount of repairs. So the $1 million is there, but the $1 million is not really, it's not capital for a purpose of purchasing something or however you have to pay for that management transfer. It really is there both as the fund balance buffer that you need to have for emergencies. So.
And it's probably committed.
Probably now.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Anything further, Mr. Dyson?
I'd be surprised if the best good for all concerned isn't that this land goes to road board. I understand that they were contemplating trying to figure out how to get some land and a building like this for their equipment. And it's a system that does work very well. And because we use local contractors and so on, it really works well. And it's not fair to compare it to what the city does here. Because we rarely have to haul snow and so on and so forth, but it is a very efficient system. And yeah. So, at the least, I almost beg of you, don't do a deal now, or we accept highest bidder at the time. Give us some time to work this out. Don't slam the door on this activity. The best would be that if the city would transfer the, whatever the word you used, the management authority, and if nothing else, do that for a month, 18 months or something, to see what we work out at the worst case.
Thank you, Mr. Dyson. Mr. Williams.
So I understand. So are you? I mean, your preference is that the fire department just give it to the road service area, or that they would buy it, but they get some 18 months to work out the terms of buying it? What?
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah. So I would say it different, because I don't see that the city owns the land and the resource, so it's not like the fire department's giving it something the fire department is not using and so on. So why not let another municipal function use that, which they arguably have a need for? So it's not them giving it to them, it's transferring one area can be used to another area can be used for the benefit of us all.
Thank you. Ms. Kennedy?
And actually, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask you more procedural, I guess. there are certainly more background to all of this in terms of how the facility has been used, who's used it, how it's been used most recently. And I don't know if you want that in this conversation or if you want that for the regular agenda.
I would say that if you want to attach that as an AIM, as an informational memorandum to this, I think that would be helpful.
Okay, all right, then we'll save it for that then.
Maybe 20 minutes.
What else do we do?
You have to fill out the time, John. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And maybe Ms. Kennedy knows this. And so, is the road surface area, is their tax rate maxed out? Do you know? Are they taxing themselves as much as they can? They're allowed?
Actually, the one who could probably give you the exact number, I mean, we have a 2.1% maximum, and the last I heard, we were at 2.01.
Yes, the code max for the mill rate is 2.1, 1.0 for maintenance, or 1.1 for maintenance and 1.0 for capital. And there's, I think this year we're right just under the 2.1.
Yes, okay. Is that?
Okay, and so, I think it's probably a fairly easy sell to the neighbors, the fact that they're going to have snow removal equipment right close where they are. They probably figure, hey, we'll get our roads done first, And so, I see this is probably a really good deal.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Gates.
Thank you. I think from what Mr. Dyson suggested, to me it means Tuesday night postponing this for about 18 months and have authorization to dispose of the property by competitive bid and try and post it out with enough time for transfer of management authority. Now, in my experience, I did not run into the documents that the management authority transfer, but I think they're very basic. I don't see any reason though why there couldn't be a number of conditions attached to them. For example, the transfers contingent upon having a tax levy increase to finance the acquisition and support the common costs of the parcels. And if we don't get that in place within 18 months, we will very government on the agenda. I think that something can be crafted to that effect, and I think that's what Mr. Dyson is asking for.
Does the administration have a response to that method?
Mr. Fossey?
Sorry, missed that question. That's sideline. What was the question?
Do you have a response to that method of delaying this for 18 months?
For 18 months. We can do a little bit more research to see what the intended use by the road service area is. Our perception has been that it would be a nice to have, not a need to have. And as we have been looking at it, we have tried not to think of it solely as the silo. We start from the legal perception that it's been maintained by the taxpayers of the fire service area. And so giving it to the road service area is much like saying Jody Hetrick has started a grant program and she is granting to the Eagle River Road Service area an asset worth $400,000. There's an opportunity cost that is real. She has that now. She can sell it, and then the municipality has $400,000. If you had the $400,000, is the highest and best use of that $400,000 to buy a new facility for the road service area? Is that the most acute need, or do we have an alternative use of that money? Our understanding has been that hasn't been the most acute need. The fire department has some real deferred maintenance and opportunities that we would like to realize. If the question on the table is, can we stall for 18 months? We can take that back and look at it. I know that we were anticipating this as part of the overall program for the fire department this year, so that will definitely take some back office scrambling, which is, I guess, a non-answer, but the best I have for you right now.
Thank you. Yes?
And I guess I would observe, when I say that we can finance this, I mean, we can go out 20 years with an interfund loan, not unlike what we have done already with the Eagle River Center. And so the annual cost to the road service would be minimal, and yet we could meet the needs of the fire department, where they are truly trying to train more firefighters today rather than later.
All right, thank you. So I have Ms. Altel, Ms. LaFrance, then Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there any time sensitivity to this? Is like the market particularly fantastic right now, or anything like that? I mean, is there anything is there a hard deadline for the road service to kind of tell us what they want to do or not. Other than if we pass this, then it's out for competitive bid and they kind of miss their opportunity.
Through the chair, Stonetown, just because you authorize disposal doesn't mean that we would put it out for competitive bid if we're already working with one of the departments. But there is no, it's more about the fire department exchanging an asset for cash that they need cash for than the market. The market in Eagle River for a single family unit is always good, frankly.
So if I may, so this is a question for the chief then. So the cash would be good now, is what I'm getting, like.
Yes, we have zero available funding for any capital improvements, capital projects, and those kind of things. And we have several facilities that are in pretty dire straits of need of investment. And this gives us the opportunity to do that. If we don't do that, we're putting it off for who knows how long.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Alatelli. Mr. Franks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, my questions had to do with timing and what the plan was, AFD's part for those funds. So those questions have been answered. Thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Franks. Mr. Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so if we finance this for 20 or 30 years, would the road surface area need to increase their tax rate, or would they be able to absorb that and with the current rate that they're collecting?
I'm not familiar with their budget, but say it's $500,000 over 20 years. That's maybe $20,000 a year they would owe, and on a $7 million budget, that's a fraction of 1%.
Maybe Ms. Kennedy would have a better idea on that.
Actually, Maury might have a better idea, so Maury Robinson.
At 20K, they should be able to absorb that.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Peters. Mr. Dyson.
Yeah, so in the best of all worlds, you guys won't just say, oh, we love those guys, give it to them, and we hope they use it very well. But in fact, to be fair, I don't know how to argue against your position. And it seems to me that fire department doesn't lose, correct?
Correct.
They get beneficial use of the money now, and
And Eagle River, if they choose to finance it, they get to use the facility. Everybody wins.
yeah, and that's why we hired him. Paid him so much. He's bright as well as charming.
Thank you, Mr. Dyson. Mr. Wells.
Could you rent it to the service area? If you get $24,000 a year, they'd be.
Through the chair, Mr. Littleton, that might work, but that doesn't give the lump sum cash this year to the fire department, which they're looking for. And then the street service area doesn't get long going, an asset that frankly then will go on their books.
Thank you, Mr. Littleton. Ms. Kennedy.
I think some of this is getting a little philosophical, so if nobody answers the question or has a response, that's fine. But philosophically, I mean, that's really what it comes down to for Chugach Eagle River residents, is it makes no sense that one entity could own something that is basically taxpayer funded or taxpayer maintained, and then turn around and say, well, we're going to sell that, and now we're going to make you buy it again. So it becomes that issue of who owns it? Who owns public facilities? Does the public own them, or do the individual entities actually own them? And this has been an ongoing argument, so to speak, with Chugach Eagle River because the lack of operational support and maintenance at that facility. There are plenty of people, believe me, that live up Highland Road that wish that it was an active fire station and believe for response purposes that it still should be. In fact, there were people that had no idea that it wasn't still active, or at least had equipment there that could respond quickly. I don't know if you look at that road on a map, it looks like it's just a long road, like it's 8-9 miles long. But it is 20-mile-an-hour curves all the way up from Eagle River to the fire station. So it takes about 8 minutes to get from one fire station to the other fire station. And that's in a car. That's not in equipment. So the people up there have long felt that it just wasn't maintained in a way that was actually supporting the community. So then when you come in and say, okay, well now we'll sell it to you, and if you have another purpose for it, you know, we're not going to do the fire service in it anymore, but let's switch purposes, but you have to buy it. So that's really what I think the community is struggling with, is why does our own municipality tell us that we have to now purchase something that's already in the community, has value in terms of what people would like to see it be used for now? If it's not going to be part of the fire service response, then let's use it for something that we know does help. And believe me, having Sanders up that windy road is a big plus. So anyway, so I'm just kind of telling you, just kind of from a philosophical standpoint, that that's the struggle that we really have with this. Why are we buying back what we already have? So.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Sure, Mr. Whittleton.
Because we have a few moments, and because you have one big service area, and I've got like 30 or so in the hillside. We're not a municipality owned. We are a service area city, and it could be a hassle. And if you just turn that around and say, fire department needs a bunch of gravel because their trucks aren't getting up the road, so they just grab a pile from Subversa and use it because it's all the city. We'd hear a lot of noise from WOCAnder anyway.
But that's
wouldn't it
who
be
is
fair,
doing the gravel.
right? Wouldn't it be fair? So we are a service area city. And I used to think that was complicated until I met people in other cities who deal with hundreds of jurisdictions to do similar things. So it's complicated, but we are not a city. We are a group of service areas. Municipality.
Thank you, Mr. Middleton. Mr. Gates.
Thank you. I was thinking about the taxpayers, what Ms. Kennedy said. In the Anchorage Fire Service area, the boundaries of it that cover Eagle River, when we go up to North Eagle River Road, North Eagle River Road Bridge, and from there it's the Cubiac Volunteer Fire Service area. So anyways, taxpayers that first acquired this parcel and constructed it are south of North Eagle River Road. But Subversa, its service area covers all the rest down to Brookwood, right? So it's those taxpayers outside that of Anchorage Fire Service area that we would be paying for the first time, but those in Eagle River would be paying twice. So I think Ms. Kennedy has a really good point, like something to look at in terms of how the financing is going to work at the transfer. But I think that some taxpayers might feel that way. There's a whole bunch of Subversa property owners that would be paying the first time and not paying twice. And that's sort of knowledge.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. Ms. Alta, were you in the queue?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you remind me, we first acquired this property through a state appropriation, though, right?
It was a state appropriation in 1982.
For how much money?
$344,000.
And when a state appropriation is made, it had to be made to the municipality in order to be able to spend it, because otherwise it was private citizens that managed to wrest that from the legislature.
That is correct.
Thank you, Ms. Alta. All right, any further questions or comments on this one? All right, seeing none, this work session is closed. Thank you. Yeah.